Davion Mitchell is having one of the most unique seasons in NBA history. But for it all to make sense, I need you to come on a journey with me. But before all that, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back to another edition of After the Buzzer. I'm your host, Couper Moorhead, and today we're talking about a player who's been with the Heat for less than a calendar year, but who is proving himself to be one of the most impactful players on the team and one of the most important players when it comes to winning. Now, Davion is known for his defense. I'm sure you've heard the nickname Off Night before, and we will get to all of that good stuff on defense because it is an important part of his game. But what he's doing with the ball in his hands on offense is just as impressive and just as important. Now, you may remember that we recently broke down Jaime Jaquez Jr.'s game and his offensive profile, and he was one of the league leaders in isolations because of what this offense emphasizes. Davion isn't far behind him in isolations. Same thing with drives and drive efficiency. Jaime Jaquez Jr. was up there. He gets downhill all the time. Davion right behind him. And in many ways, Davion's story mirrors that of Jaime, where Erik Spoelstra changes the offense. No pick and rolls, no handoffs, speed. And that offense has fit Davion's game like a glove. Now, like Jaime, Davion is one of the primary engines of this potentially revolutionary offense. Time is going to have to tell whether it is or not. We'll see. But they play extremely fast, in part because they get the ball at the floor extremely fast. Jaime catches the ball, and he's going. Davion is the same way. And, the only player on the team who brings up the ball more than Jaime is Davion. And like Jaime, Davion has excelled at getting downhill. He does it with a bit more speed, but still with some physicality, whereas Jaime is a bit more, brute force and then speed second. And, it all works in this one-on-one ecosystem that Erik Spoelstra's offense is not just emphasizing, but is almost built entirely on. You beat your man with the dribble. Now, I want Bam Adebayo to explain the rest.
It just makes it easy for him. You're not doing a lot of play calls. You're not trying to figure out, who needs the ball. This offense is built for him. We have the number one pace. All of us run, but, he's the head of the snake. When Davion gets the ball and he gets up the court, it's literally might be 3 dribbles. And that just puts defenses on their heel because, obviously, he can get downhill. He'll shoot a quick layup, and, people got to respect that. So, and then when defense collapse, he just makes it easy. Stop on 2 feet and then hit the open person.
Again, this is all similar stuff to what Jaime has said about Jaime, to what Spo has said about Jaime, and much of it applies equally to Davion. The system simplifies the reads. There's fewer coverages, fewer layers of the defense to read because you're not coming off pick and rolls. You're not having the actions with a lot of bodies, crowding the way. Everybody's working in space. You're focused on being in the right spot. And when you have the ball in space, beat your man one-on-one. Then you can worry about where the help is coming from. That's the read that you have to make once you put the ball on the floor. But there's no coverage reads because there's no coverages. It's just one-on-one defense half the time, right? And as long as you play off of 2 feet, so you're not getting to your launching pad, getting up in the air, getting in trouble, there's always somewhere to move the ball to because the way the system works, once you drive, someone else is filling in all the other spots. So if the help comes, you know exactly where your teammates are going to be. And Davion is making those reads over and over again. He's making them, cleanly, which is what we're about to talk about, because he hasn't just been nails with the playmaking. Part of the risk with turning the speed dials up to 11 is that teams tend to struggle with turnovers as a result. That's throughout NBA history. The faster you play, your turnovers tend to go up. Coaches want to play fast in training camp and in preseason, and then it turns out some rosters can't handle it because the turnovers, spike, and then all that preseason aim for, upping the pace comes back down because they got to get the turnovers back down. That hasn't really been a problem for Miami, in part because Davion is almost single-handedly making it a non-issue as the team's starting point guard. Of all the players averaging 30 minutes a game in the league, Davion leads them all in assist-to-turnover ratio, almost 5 assists to every turnover. That is wildly efficient when it comes to passing. Okay? Now, that's a luxury, of course, to be able to play at warp speed and know that your lead guard is going to take care of the ball. Huge boon for Miami's offense. And it's not like he's just making safe plays. He's not just, coming down, pitching it to a guy who takes a quick three. There is some of that, and it helps that, the team as a whole is shooting really well from three, and that helps those assist numbers go up. But, he's making high-value plays as well. 80% of Davion's passes that go into the paint, passes where the player in the paint, you have to be in the paint to catch the ball. So you're passing into the teeth of the defense, right? 80% of his passes that go into the paint lead to a potential assist. So lead to a shot. That is the highest rate in the entire league. If he's going to make a pass into the paint, he's finding guys that are ready to take a shot, to make a shot. That's just extremely efficient play. Now, here's where things get very unique as far as overall profile goes, and I want to really break down all the pieces of Davion's game here. So let's smash some stats together, and I want you to see where this all leads. We know he has a high assist percentage and a low turnover percentage. So let's put those two numbers in the pot. Let's start there. Now, he's shooting well from three. He's shooting 40%. Let's put the bar at 35%. Just a good average three-point shooter. And he's shooting extremely well on two-pointers, which is an unusual skill for a guard, particularly a guard of his size, but he's finishing really well. And those running floaters, runners basically, all those shots in and around the rim that aren't always layups, right? You've got to finish up and over big guys just outside the restricted area. He's shooting really well there too. So let's split those up. Let's put 3-point percentage in and 2-point percentage. And then we know he's a playmaker on defense as well. He's got a really good steal percentage, the percent of opponent possessions that end with him getting a steal. So let's add steal percentage in as well. Now, what players come up? What names come up when you put all those stats into the pot? Well, you've got Chris Paul. You've got Nikola Jokic. You've got LeBron James, James Harden, Tyrese Halliburton, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Steph Curry. Those are some names, right? And look, I get it. When you hear all those stats being smushed together and you think I'm stringing together a narrative, which I am in part, you probably say to yourself, well, he's just trying to cherry pick numbers to build a narrative. And of course, we are telling a story here, but, it is kind of a cosmic gumbo in that way. And for those of you who have been in the internet streets for a while, you probably think of that famous Thaddeus Young stat graphic. I get it, again. But we're not comparing players here. I'm not saying that Davion is the same as those players. I'm not saying he's Chris Paul. I'm not saying he's Steph Curry. I'm certainly not saying he's Nikola Jokic, because nobody is. But the point is that we're just trying to narrow down exactly who he is as a player and how rare the entire package is. Those guys are all-star, all-NBA, MVP level guys. We're not saying Davion is that, but we're also not done, because there's a couple other names on this list. One of them is T.J. McConnell, who you might remember. He's had some really great games against the Heat. He was amazing in the playoffs last year with the Indiana Pacers as part of their great run. And Davion fits there as far as being, a lead guard who can be a star in his role. T.J. McConnell, though, he comes off the bench generally, and he is a bit of a spark plug on offense. He's looking for his shot just as much as he's trying to play make for others. Davion doesn't really do that. He's a starter, so maybe it would be different if he was coming off the bench, but T.J. McConnell's usage rate, looking for a shot, is over 20%. And usage rate, if you're not familiar, is the percent of your own team's possessions that end with you taking a shot, drawing a foul, or committing a turnover. So it's how much of your team's possessions are you using. T.J. McConnell is over 20. Those all-star guys tend to be 30 and above. Well, Davion isn't quite there. So let's add that filter. Let's bring the number down below 20. We're left with two names. We've got Davion, and this is in NBA history. Davion and Terry Porter. Now, if you're not familiar with Terry Porter, he was the lead point guard for the Portland Trail Blazers in the early to mid-90s. The same Portland Trail Blazers that made the NBA Finals twice during that run, losing to the Lakers with Magic Johnson and the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan. So Terry Porter also an all-star in his time. Very, very good point guard, and someone who, if you're in the same boat as a guy like Terry Porter, you're doing pretty well for yourself. But even Terry Porter's usage rate in the season in question, 1990-91, his usage rate was 19.6. Davion's is 13%. Right? We're talking a minuscule usage rate, particularly for a starting point guard. And, a lot of that comes from Davion just really picking his spots. We did a podcast with him earlier in the season. I suggest you go watch that, listen to it. Really great conversation. Love talking to Davion. But he talked about how over the years he just really learned how to pick his spot to balance being the point guard and a scorer. And you see that. That's why his usage rate is so low. He'll shoot a high percentage, but he just doesn't shoot very often. He just finds those little sections of the game where he can be aggressive and take, 2 or 3 shots, in a row. And the other part about this is that none of this feels particularly unsustainable, right? We put in average 3-point shooting, assist rate over 30%. That's sustainable. His turnover percentage is sustainable. And you put all those things together, nobody else in the history of the NBA, at least since 1973 when all these stats are available, has had a season like Davion is having with all that efficiency, the playmaking, the defense, the shooting, at such a low usage rate, in part because of the role he plays with the team. And that's what you're left with, a unique player in a unique role in a unique system, and Davion is thriving in it. Now, before we go, we do have to talk about the defense, which has been his calling card. It was in college. It was in the draft. It was before he got to Miami. It still is. It's a really important part of his game. Davion's ability to switch has actually enabled the Heat to start switching pick and roll significantly more often than they had in the past couple of seasons when they really had to go away from it in favor of more conservative drop coverages just because of the personnel they had on the team. Now with Davion, and of course it helps to have, a guy like Andrew Wiggins as well, but it enables them to get back to Bam Adebayo's strength, which is as the best switch defender in the entire NBA. So just being on the team in the lineup, Davion helps with that. But there's also a time when, you can be solid. You watch Davion against league guards, and it can be really important when he can just play defense with his chest, stop the ball with his chest, move his feet, ball doesn't get into the paint, and that can really mess up a team and an opponent's offense if they rely on the ball getting into the paint and Davion isn't letting it get in there. But there's also a time to be slightly reckless, and we will let Coach Spo explain what that means.
I don't know. It's just funny. There's some things that stick. It was a film session earlier in the year, and I was commenting about a play Davion was making, and I said, hey, that was slightly reckless. And then I said, but I come to think of it, I like it when you're more slightly reckless. And evidently everybody thought that was humorous, and it stuck. So now it's becoming a theme.
Now, what stretch best exemplifies that slightly reckless mentality? I think you look at the end of the game against Detroit recently, where Detroit was doing everything they could possibly do to get Davion screened off of Cade Cunningham down the stretch, and Davion made play after play after play, stealing the ball, getting it going the other way, doing exactly what you need. You need to take risks because your team is trying to come back, and they almost completed a miracle comeback before Detroit found a really clever way to kind of flip a screen against Davion when he tried to trap. So Detroit pulled it out, but Davion was, awesome defensively there against one of the best offensive players in the league, and he made Cade's life very, very difficult at the end. You need guys like that. You need guys who can be solid, but you also need them guys who can be defensive playmakers, because those defensive playmakers who can create live ball turnovers that go the other way, they can create sequences that turn big games, and that stuff matters, especially in the playoffs. And that's Davion. He's solid. He's well-rounded in every way. He's a star in his role, but he's also capable of being slightly reckless right when the team needs him to be. That's all for today, folks. I'm Couper Moorhead, your host for After the Buzzer. Thank you for joining me. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube for notifications of all future content, including more After the Buzzers, both analysis and interviews with players that we have coming up. But until then, thanks for joining me. Take care. Goodbye.